I advocate for people to post on LinkedIn, like you're drawing attention to yourself. I think most people are not willing to do it. But if I'm being honest, what I've observed is most people that do it end up finding jobs faster than those who don't.
Welcome to the Data Career Podcast, the podcast that helps aspiring data professionals land their next data job. Here's your host, Avery Smith.
My guest today is Matt Mike. Matt Mike is a content creator on LinkedIn and YouTube where he helps people with non-technical backgrounds break into data analytics. He's a data analyst for a company called Iridium. I don't know exactly if I said that right. And he's been a business analyst.
Iridium.
Iridium. Okay, there we go. And a business analyst for Mobile Mini Solutions. He used to be a teacher. He used to be in sales. He used to be in business operations. And now he's a data analyst and he's helping people break into data analytics. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Avery. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the introduction. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. You have a lot of good content on LinkedIn. So I think a lot of people are going to benefit from your story today. I want to dive into a little bit more about what your story is because you were a teacher. Is that right?
I was, yeah. I was a teacher for a couple years. I did special education, but I eventually moved into administration. So I was actually the dean of students for a charter school here in Phoenix. Phoenix, Arizona is where I live. That was for grades 4 through 8. So I was a teacher and an administrator for a little while. Yeah, prior to data.
Okay. And that was just kind of exhausting, not your passion at the end of the day, or?
Yeah, so with teaching, I mean, it was great. So I graduated with an English degree for anyone who doesn't know. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with that, but I ended up going into teaching. That was kind of my plan when I graduated. Um, but you'll notice that I wasn't an English teacher, right? So I worked for this company that was contracted by the Department of Child Safety all throughout college. And I just had a lot of exposure with high needs families and kids. And so it was a charter school, right? So charter schools are just a little bit different than like a typical public school. I did that, but I liked administration more because I was more interested in leadership and had an opportunity to do that. But it's stressful. So Arizona, I don't know if it still is, but it's the 48th worst state for education in the country here in the United States. The pay is not great. It's really stressful. There's no like state budgeting, or very little rather. And it was stressful being an administrator and it wasn't really my passion. And I just believe that to be in education for the long haul, because there's just so many things difficult about it, you have to really, really be passionate about it. And I wasn't. So I left education to go into sales. And I was a business to business salesperson for Staples, so Staples Corporate. And my thought was, I'm going to go into sales and make a bunch of money. I'm going to kill it. And I was quickly humbled. I mean, I hated it. I hated it so much. It was not good for me. Nothing against people who love sales. I think a lot of companies need those kind of people. I'm just not the kind of person who can cold call 100 companies a day and drive around town, handle pulling businesses and trying to set up meetings for a program that I didn't believe in with 1 ounce of my being. So I was only there for 6 months. And then that's when I kind of shifted into corporate business operations, stepped into that and actually took a pay decrease because I just needed something that I could like something that wouldn't bring me a lot of anxiety. And I was also trying to kind of like figure out the next step in my career journey. That was actually a really great job. So just started off as an associate there. It was technically billing and collections, but it's just, not like break your kneecaps kind of collections, just like it was more billing and then following up with companies who had outstanding bills and keeping records of those bills. That's where I got a lot of exposure to Excel, though it wasn't incredibly technical. I did that for a couple of years and became a supervisor. And when I was a supervisor, I did that for a couple of years as well. I was inspired to like I wanted to be like the resident expert in Excel while I was there, because at that level, I was handling accounts where, we were owed like $1 million+ by some companies. We were a pretty big company. And so logistically, it was kind of tough to keep track of certain records. And there's a lot you can do with Excel to make your life easier. And that was pretty much all we used. That was like our tech stack, if you will. So I started taking a bunch of online courses, and that was kind of like the gateway drug into tools like Tableau, Power BI, and SQL, and discovering the online data community. And I can get more into the actual transition into data later on, but that's kind of where it all started. So I liked my job, but I discovered data analytics, and I really liked that. Like that kind of became my passion. And the more I dug into it, I was like, wow, this is great. This is what I want to be doing. So yeah, a little bit of my background there.
That's awesome. And I love just thinking about Dean, Matt, Mike walking around and bossing some students around in the middle school. That's so
It
funny
is
to think
crazy.
about. Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet. And I love also, I mean, you tried out all these different careers, and I'm just thinking we've had people on the podcast. So I just had one of my boot camp students, Tim Beecher, on the podcast, and he was a locksmith, didn't like that, went into sales and kind of had the same thing. It was like, man, I hate
Oh
being in
wow.
sales. And so got into data
Hmm.
analytics after that. So I was thinking about Tim as you were talking, and then I was also thinking about Beth Pearson, another one of my boot camp students who was a special needs education teacher in Phoenix, Arizona, actually, and
Oh
now is
wow.
a business analyst at Chase Bank. So, anyways, it's just funny that there's all these non-technical backgrounds. You tried a lot of them, and then here
Hmm.
you are in data analytics. It's just
Yeah,
crazy, and
that's what
I'm
I
glad.
love
I guess
about
you're
it.
glad you're here, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this was, going down this path was 100% the right choice for me. I know it. Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the field is it's such a melting pot. Even though it's like a technical field, there's so many soft skills that are so required. It's like this really unique blend that you just get people from all walks of life in it who are analytically minded, but they've spent time in other careers where they have these really unique set of soft skills. And it's just so cool. Like, yeah, I talk to people who have some pretty cool backgrounds, and I love it.
Yeah, that's really neat. So you discover data analytics. You're like, oh, Excel's fun. I like looking, at numbers. How did you actually get into your first data job?
Yeah. Okay. So I was kind of going back to when I was like a business operations supervisor. At the time, I was tracking towards being an assistant controller, and I was thinking like, okay, I want to go down this path of finance. But when I started to discover some of these other tools like Tableau or whatever, it's funny. So I was doing this. They kind of had this program at my company that was sort of you kind of had to apply to be in it, and it was this like shadowing program to eventually become an assistant controller. And part of it required like shadowing the business analysts in our company. And they would kind of walk me through what they did. Like, yeah, we use Tableau and we do this. And I'm like, whoa, that's like really cool. And I had like all these questions for them. And it just turned out that like I just had a bigger interest in what they were doing rather than like this other path of finance. And I started like kind of learning those tools on my own. And I even like I picked up Power BI and I implemented it with my team as a supervisor and kind of just built some really janky dashboards because I was really new at it. And I applied for a business analyst role that opened up at my company, but I just didn't end up getting it. It was a pretty competitive role. A lot of people applied, as are most analyst jobs. And I was like, okay, well, if there's not an opportunity here, I'm gonna look elsewhere too because I'd like to get into this sooner rather than later. And the business analyst job at Will Scott Mobile Mini was the one that turned out. So prior to that, like I had spent time also learning SQL, getting deeper into Tableau and things like that. That was yeah. So that was my first role in data. I'm no longer in that position, but that was a pretty great role. I liked it. I was reporting to the VP in that role. We used a lot of Tableau, so I was in Tableau almost every day, and I really got to exercise a lot of the Excel skills that I had spent many months honing. The only reason I left that role was it was fully in person. So I know one of the things about data that's really sexy to people is the opportunity of being fully remote, and that is an incredible opportunity. But when you go for those fully remote roles, you're opening yourself up to the global market, and it's just way more competitive. So I was targeting those roles, but I was also looking at local roles. Like, hey, I can, if I have to be in office or be hybrid, I think that's worth it to get into the field. And just what I ended up finding in that role is fully in office. And once I had been there like 8 months, I was trying to negotiate being hybrid, and they just wouldn't allow it for the department. And so I just started like kind of putting my feelers out there. Found a data analyst job at Iridium that has been a lot more heavy in SQL and Power BI, which has been great. And it also came with a pay increase and stuff too, so I think it was a good jump. But I'm really grateful for that first business analyst role, because I was using the tech stack I wanted to get better at. I learned a lot from my VP. I was kind of siloed as an analyst. I wasn't on like a data team, and oftentimes business analysts aren't. Like most business analyst jobs that I've come across, you're usually reporting to the VP, like a non-technical VP, and just kind of like making sense of the business data. I worked hand in hand with one of our data engineers and things like that. So I still had technical mentors and partners, but there was a lot in that role I had to kind of teach myself. And actually, my current role has been kind of similar, but I don't mind that. So I think I went kind of beyond your initial question there, but I wanted to provide some more context because I think it's really helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, that is super useful for people to hear. Okay, sweet. Awesome. And I want to go back to like how you actually got that first data job, because you tried to get the internal role, you
Mhm.
didn't get it. What, like, how did you get this first data job? Like, did you interview in person? Did you find that job on LinkedIn? How did you get in that role?
Yeah, so I did find it on LinkedIn. I was just, kind of opened myself up to hybrid and in office jobs and found that. But kind of what went into like the work I put in before getting that role is, so kind of like backpedaling a little bit. I didn't get that internal business analyst job. Kind of went back to the drawing board, and that's when I really started to dive into tools like SQL, get a lot better at Tableau, and build out a portfolio. So I just invested a lot of time in trying to figure out how to build a data portfolio. And at the time, there weren't, at least in my experience, there weren't a ton of resources for doing this, at least not in an easy way. And I studied the way a lot of other people I saw on LinkedIn were doing it, and kind of like mishmashed it all together in my own way that I detail in my ebook. But yeah, I put together a portfolio of projects and just started getting out there and applying. And I found that the portfolio was really helpful to have. And that was one thing that stood out to my VP, who I got that first role at. That I had a portfolio and I had put that work in and put the time in to demonstrate my skills. So it's always something I recommend. I mean, especially if you're coming from a non-technical background, you really have nothing to show. Like you don't have experience, you don't have a degree in the field. So what are you going to do? Like you have to have a portfolio. You have to have some kind of work samples. I think for that role in particular, my domain knowledge was especially helpful too. So this is something that people should look out for. So the business analyst job that I got was within the credit and collections department of the company. And I don't know how much people heard earlier on when people couldn't hear me, but I was a business operations supervisor doing billing and collections for a kind of bigger company. And so they told me when I got hired in that first BA role, they said, yeah, we actually interviewed people who were more technical than you, but you had the domain knowledge, like you had the soft skills that we were looking for. And so that's why we chose you. And that ended up, just being one of the tipping points in me getting the role, is having an understanding of the department. So I think how that applies to others is you can sometimes leverage the things you've learned in your current role outside of data to get a future data job. Or if you don't, like say, I think you mentioned someone who was like a welder or something, or a mechanic, or people like come from nannying like all over the place. So you may not have like domain knowledge to lean on, but there's a specific type of field you want to be in within data. You can spend time learning about it through projects or creating projects. Like if you want to be a marketing analyst, just do a bunch of marketing data projects, like kind of show that you've at least you've at least been intentional about trying to learn the domain before. It's hard to substitute experience actually within the domain, but showing that like you've actually put time into trying to learn about it before you get into it. So I mentioned the domain knowledge because it actually was really crucial for me in getting that. Like I might not have gotten that job if I had been coming from a completely different field prior to that. They probably would have gone with one of those more technical people. So that's why soft skills really are important in a role like this, and you can really leverage them in a powerful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point to bring up, that when you were going to your first data job, you were just leaving a job where you were kind of working in that billing and collections world. And so when you got that data
Hmm.
job, that was in billing and collections, when you were interviewing there, that domain was really important to them. And that's the cool thing about data analytics is really industry agnostic. There's data analytics nearly in every field and every industry. And so
Yeah.
whatever you're doing right now can be relevant to data analytics, you know. And the boot camp, we have a lot of students who are teachers, and a lot of them will go find jobs being data analysts for their school system. Or we'll have, I don't know, someone that's in, yeah, like maybe they're in like hardcore marketing, they'll become marketing analysts. And so I think what you did was really
Hmm.
good. I call that finding a stepping stone job, where it's kind of like half data, half your domain. You kind of meet in the middle. And that actually gives you the experience that you're qualified and sets you apart as a candidate. Well, even though you're maybe not as technical or technically skilled as the other applicants, you have that domain knowledge and kind of sets you apart, which is crazy, right? That's like a cheat code, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And even speaking from having been there, like it really was helpful because part of the reason of them wanting that is it takes less time to educate you on their data. And even though, every company is different, so you're not going to come in fully understanding the data, you just never will because they did do things differently. They had different systems. I was still able to get up to speed much faster and I just understood how things worked. So when I was building certain reports or dashboards, I just had a little bit more intuition into what they would want to be looking for, and ended up being able to build some pretty critical reports that even though I left, are still kind of a part of their cadence over there. So that's just a cool thing.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, just the fact that you know some of the words and vocabulary in the collections is really important. So I think that's a job well done. And
Hmm.
then I also want to say the other cheat code I think that led you to landing that first data job was having that project. I talk about a lot of the times, I call it the circle of doom. It's, if you've never seen this, I show it quite a bit on my webinar and on LinkedIn and stuff like that, where it says it's a circle and it says I can't get a job because I don't have experience, because I can't get a job, and it just goes on and on and on.
Mm,
And the way that
yeah.
I say that you break the cycle of doom is by doing projects and portfolios. So walk me through, like, when you first created that portfolio, what projects did you have on there? Were they guided, or did you kind of do them on your own?
Yeah, so I did do them on my own. I had done some guided projects, and at the time, I might have had one or two that were guided in there, but the ones I really tried to highlight were the ones I made. And they weren't, the most incredible projects in the world. And most of them just kind of had like data that was interesting to me. It wasn't like domain oriented data for those projects. But I did try to focus on like having personal projects. I think, it's a little tricky when it comes to that. Like I think guided projects are great for exercising the skills that you learn in a course or something like that. But I think to really conceptualize a lot of those skills, you have to make your own project. And so the tricky thing again is like I don't think a lot of managers will know whether or not it's a guided project. Maybe some will if they like see the same project in different portfolios, they might, become privy to it, or if they're just really in that world. But I just think like for your own sake and actually being a subject matter expert, you're not going to get there if you're not building something from scratch. And ultimately, you can make it more unique if you're doing it yourself. And it's going to challenge you more. It's going to be a little harder. It's going to take a little longer, but ultimately, it's going to be a lot better for you. And if it is a project that you made yourself and spent a lot of time thinking about, one question that comes up a lot in interviews is tell me about a project you're really passionate about, or one of the projects in your portfolio. Like, tell me about your favorite project in this portfolio. And it's harder to speak passionately about a project that someone else made that you just sort of copied to, use the skills a little bit. So I think like sometimes if your portfolio is full of guided projects, I think it can kind of backfire. It doesn't hurt to have one or two, but I'd say you want more than 50% to be personal projects and eventually for 100% of them to be personal projects. So that's my take on
Mm.
that subject. Mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think there's any argument that doing personal projects is always going to be better, more impressive than doing guided projects. But I think the best project that you can possibly do is one that you actually finish. And from what I've seen
Mhm.
is the majority of people will try to do their own projects, they'll get stuck and they give up and they just their project goes to the project graveyard. So
Mhm.
what can really help in making sure that you get a project done is what you said, is actually choose something that you're actually passionate about, because if you're passionate about it and you're excited about it, that's going to give you that motivation to actually overcome, obstacles and challenges that you face during the project, which is really important. Because if you choose, like for instance, I mean, maybe you like collections and billing, but I can't imagine there's too many people on planet Earth that are too passionate about billings and collections. So like if you chose that
Yeah,
as a personal project and you hit, let's say like you hit some error and you can't figure out the error, you're probably going to give up. But if you do it on something like you're actually interested in, like football or I don't know, makeup or whatever you're actually like passionate about, when those obstacles do occur, you're going to be like much more motivated to actually, get through it. It's going to be fun. You're going to be like enjoying it.
totally. One of the best things you can do is just making a project that you find really interesting. You're going to be more motivated to complete it because you're genuinely interested in the data. Like what one of my favorite projects that I've done, it's not even like, in my portfolio anymore, but it was like a LA Airbnb listings project I did in Power BI. And it wasn't like, the greatest project in the world, but it was data I was actually interested in. I was like, oh, like someday it'd be cool to, like, I don't know, rent or, get a property in LA and rent it out as an Airbnb or something like that. And I'm from LA too. Lived there most of my life. And so it was just like interesting data to me. I was like, oh, this is like really interesting to know. And the questions I came up with going into the project were pretty genuine. And when I completed it, I was like, cool. Like I felt like I actually learned something that means something like through the project. And so whatever it is, like whether you're analyzing like NFL football injuries or whatever, if it's something that you're interested in, you have a lot more fun with it. It's going to end up being a better project overall, probably. And again, like in the interview hot seat, you'll probably be more enthusiastic talking about it as well, know the ins and outs of it a little bit more. So it's good. Like it's good to have those domain oriented projects, but being able to blend that with your interests is really the sweet spot, or even better. But at the end of the day, even if it's a really random data set, but it's just one that you care about, I don't think you can go wrong with that.
Yeah, I agree. It makes it more fun. And then, like you said, you can speak about it more confidently in interviews. Interviews are scary. And like, I hate interviews, but
Yeah.
if you can take an interview and flip it on its head, where instead of the interviewer asking you like random questions, like random technical questions or random behavioral questions, and if you can present them, hey, I built this project, and then all of a sudden they're asking you about the project, which is something you know about and you care about, that makes the interview way easier, way less stressful, and all of a sudden the
Hmm.
questions you're getting you're more comfortable with. So I totally agree, that's the power of having a really good project where you've kind of done personal data, you're actually interested in it, and you can speak about it more like genuinely. I
Yeah.
want to talk
100%.
about publishing projects. Like when you publish projects, how do you publish projects? Where do you put them on a portfolio? What type of publishing do you typically do?
Yeah, so I like to advocate for having your own landing page style portfolio. So in the beginning when I did this, I just had like an actual landing page that just it was just a little bit of info on me and then links to my Tableau Public, links to my GitHub where I kind of had more of the project data housed, but as time has gone by and I've progressed through my career, now I practice and I preach, I guess, having like a website where your projects are actually featured on the website. I think it's always important, and I guess this is kind of more of like a marketing perspective, but I think any reducing clicks and reducing effort for the people looking at your portfolio is really important. If you're making your, potential employer click to your page, then like click to your GitHub, then click to your repository, then click to your write up, and then click to download your code and all this stuff. Like it can end up being a lot, and you might lose them really quickly, especially if they have 100 other applicants. But if you can make a website, they click once to get to your website, and then all they have to do is scroll down and they see a bunch of info about your best and brightest projects. Then if they're interested, they can maybe click a read more button that takes them to an actual write-up page or something like that. And they could look more. I think it's easier for them, but it's also smoother, it's cleaner. There's a lot of really great website tools where you can make a really beautiful looking website now. One of my favorites is Card. Of course, there's GitHub Pages if you don't mind, learning like some HTML or Markdown or whatever. And there's WordPress, though I'm not the biggest fan of that. But there's a lot of options out there to build a website, and it's never been easier. Like you don't have to hire someone to do it. And tools like Card are 100% free. So that's what I advocate for. That's what I use. I've found that to be really helpful, but I've also seen a lot of other people get a ton of success out of it. So it takes some work to build it, but I think it's so worth it to do it. So that's how I publish my projects. And there's other ways to do it. Like you could do a LinkedIn article. Avery, I think that's one thing you talk about, and I think that's a great way to do it too. And you could always just like, even if you have your landing page website, the like read more to view the project write-up can just take them to the LinkedIn article. Like you can just make it all kind of work together. But totally think that having your own website is one of the best steps someone can take. So a website of some form or fashion.
Yeah, we totally agree there. Where I think having a separate website where you can actually like talk about your projects, because I think it's really important to
Mm-hmm.
talk about them, because that's like the whole point of a data analyst is you're bridging the data with the business. And if you just give them the data, you're missing out on like half the part of being a data analyst. And so to be
Yeah.
honest, and if you're listening, this is the tough truth that I have to say over and over and over again. If you're going for a data analyst role, your GitHub does not count as your portfolio, because two things. One,
Agreed.
like Matt said, you're giving that recruiter, that hiring manager, way too much friction to actually get to the good stuff. And you're making them work for it. Like they have to do so many clicks, they have to do so many scrolls, they have to like actually look at your code. Newsflash, no one on planet Earth wants to actually read your code. Like no one even
Yeah.
like on the job wants to, your boss does not want to read your code. He just wants to, he or
No.
she just wants to know the results of your code. And if you're just giving them the code, like no one cares. Like zero people, especially like some random internet recruiter or hiring manager who's going through 473 different applicants. Like you're really just like giving them more homework, and it's just giving them more of a reason to just click X and like rejection. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like I 100% agree with, like, couldn't agree with you more there. GitHub does not count as like a website or a portfolio. I think it's okay to like show your code as like a part of your write up with tools
Totally.
like
100%.
Snaplify, or what's the other, you were actually the one
Carbon,
that Carbon
carbon.se.
is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carbon's a great one too. But you just want to implement it as like a part of the write up. And if you can't embed it or take screenshots of it and include it, don't have it. Like, don't just have like a file with code, or like a kind of how GitHub does it. You just have to go to a separate page almost to like view code in some cases. But those tools are great, Carbon and Snapify, because they make it look nice, like it's aesthetically pleasing. And yeah, I don't think
Yep.
anyone is going to spend too much time like really dissecting the code, right? But providing it in an aesthetically pleasing format is like a nice thing to do, just to show that like you've done it, so that they could at least kind of check off their list like, oh, okay, like he wrote some SQL code, like great, or some Python code. But that's where like data visualization is so important, is like, um,
Yes.
if you have a SQL project, doing the analysis in SQL, but then visualizing it in a tool like Tableau, or if you're doing a Python project, you can visualize that too with Matplotlib. Like, you still want to have visualizations to show the results of your work, rather than just like slapping some code at them, because yeah, it's gonna lose people quickly, I think.
Yeah, you're totally right. Because these people, these hiring managers, they're going through literally hundreds of people, different resumes. If you guys haven't listened to what it's like to hire a data analyst, go listen to Jesse Morris's episode on the Data Career Podcast, and then the Hiring Manager's Secrets episode of the Data Career Podcast, where we walk through what it's like to actually hire a data analyst. And you guys, like,
Mm,
they're busy. And so that's why one of the things I talk about often is the 10-1-10 rule, which is true of your resume, true of your LinkedIn, and true of your portfolio, which basically means when a recruiter or a hiring manager clicks on your profile or your portfolio, you have 10 seconds to make an impression. After 10 seconds, they're
mm,
going to make a decision to either spend one more minute on your stuff or to leave. After that 1 minute, they'll basically decide if they like you or not. And if they like you, they'll spend 10 more minutes on your stuff. You have to make an impression in 10 seconds, an impression in 1 minute, and then you've earned 10 minutes of time. And then hopefully you'll move forward and earn an hour of time in an interview or something like that. But it's really
mm.
important. The speed of which you're impressing people is really important, which is one of the reasons why Matt talked about data visualization. Because if you can make your project look aesthetically pleasing, you're more likely to actually earn that 1 minute of time in those first 10 seconds. Because we as humans, we like to see, we don't like to read code. We don't even really like to read. So, we talked about the project write ups, but I make sure that whenever I tell people, I'm
Mhm.
like, you have to use bold on anywhere you want them to look. Like, because that's what they're going to
Oh,
skim
yeah.
through is the bolds and the bullet points and stuff like that.
That's like one of those little details that actually go a long way. And that's such great insight that you shared too, because I think about this sometimes. And sometimes we're almost like too confident in ourselves where like we think someone's gonna like, man, this is so good that like someone's really gonna spend 10 minutes to read all this. Like, 'cause that's kind of what you're saying when you're just like, look at this 10 page, code PDF I put together or whatever it is. Like, it's like you might be really smart, but you're not so impressive that someone's going to spend that much time on what you have. I mean, there's a reason why like YouTube and Instagram are so popular these days, right? Like we just want to like scroll quickly and see visuals
Yep.
and like we want to get to the point. So I think your job when you create a portfolio and you create a website, you said it earlier, gotta give them the good stuff up front. Like you have to give them a reason to stick around. You can't bore them. It has to look nice. Like it has to be smooth. That's why I think it's almost like you're coming into it with a bit of a marketing perspective. I mean, whenever you're on the job hunt, like you really are kind of selling yourself. So it
Yep.
helps to have almost like a sales marketing like
Yes.
scope on it. Like I'm trying to sell my stuff here. I have 10 seconds to prove to them why they should give me an
Yep.
extra minute. And if you bore them, like you're gonna get passed up very quickly. So yeah, that's really great perspective there that you shared.
Yeah, you can't bore. And it goes back to earlier when you landed your first data job, you weren't the most technically skilled to land that job, right? It's really what it was is you had
Yeah.
good domain experience and you were good at marketing yourself. And like unfortunately, like the skills at this point, I talk about the SPN method a lot. S being skills, P being project port slash portfolio, N being networking.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the skills part is very rarely what is actually the differentiating factor between getting the job and not getting the job. A lot of the time it's the P or the
Mm.
portfolio or the marketing of yourself and the networking of yourself. And that's, I mean, it's sad. You want to live in a world where maybe the most skilled people are rewarded that way, but it's just like not reality. Relationships and marketing yourself, the way you portray yourself play like a huge role. And that's maybe good for some of us because maybe we're not that smart, right? Like I think that's there's a place for that that's actually
I
like
know that's
positive.
true for me.
I
Yeah,
don't think that's
definitely
true
true
for
for
you. I
me.
think you're very smart, but I get your point.
Yeah, and on that networking point too, I mean, and thinking about that marketing perspective, that's why I advocate for people to post on LinkedIn as well. Like you're drawing attention to yourself. I think most people are not willing to do it. But if I'm being honest, what I've observed is most people that do it end up finding jobs faster than those who don't. I could be totally wrong there. That's just kind of like what I observe, or even people who I've had relationships with who do that. It's just like another layer. Like you're promoting yourself, you're getting free feedback on your projects when you post about projects. You're developing connections, which can lead to just like learning more, but also perhaps getting referrals. You can attract recruiters to you. And you can't go into it with the expectation that like every time I post a project, I'm going to get 20 recruiters lined up in my inbox. I don't even get that. But you will get some that reach out to you
Yep.
totally. And some of those roles might be great, some not. But it's like if you're really trying to go all in to the data job hunt, it's another dimension that is going to help you so much is just having having a LinkedIn presence of some sort. And that's the networking aspect. And there's multiple ways to network on LinkedIn. Like some of it can be kind of, just from messaging people or whatever, but engaging on other people's posts, but also creating your own content through like posting projects or insights, whatever. It helps a lot of people. I think it's
It
worth it,
does.
and it's scary. But that first time you hit post is a pretty foundational moment. Like once you hit post that first time, it gets a little bit easier the second time. So if you can get over that initial fear, and I had it too. I mean, I was terrified the first time I hit post, especially the first time I hit post about anything data related. But it gets easier, and you're going to open up doors and networking opportunities if you do it.
For sure. I totally agree. I think posting on LinkedIn is a great way to bring attention to yourself for the job hunt. It's really, at the end of the day, you can boost your chances. At the end of the day, landing a job is a lot about luck. And you can boost your chances the most you
Hmm.
can. I like to say you can expand your surface area of your net to catch luck falling from the sky. But
Mm,
like, really, at the end
yeah.
of the day, it takes a lot of luck. So posting on LinkedIn, I think, is one way that you can expand your surface area to catch luck. I think that's a great point. Posting on LinkedIn could be very valuable. Any other things that you can see aspiring data professionals maybe do a little bit more in their job hunt?
I think we covered a lot of great stuff there. The
We
projects
did.
super important. Yeah, having a website, networking through LinkedIn, I think those are the big things. Just like a point on networking. So I I don't know how to say this without sounding I don't know, kind of weird, but I get a lot of messages from people who want to network. And a lot of times I'll just get messages that say, "Hey Matt, I want to be a data analyst. Do you have any job referrals for me?" And that's not a good way to network. I do respond to those, but I just say like, "Hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm happy to connect. No, I don't have anything at this time." But I think if you really want to build quality connections on LinkedIn, you have to like engage with people in some form or fashion first. Like if you're engaging like on people's posts, it doesn't have to be a content creator. Like it just there's tons of people out there creating content who aren't trying to do anything but just kind of like share what they're doing. And if you just like engage with a lot of people on LinkedIn and you engage regularly, you kind of like are breaking the ice in the relationship. But you also even meet people through the comments thread. Like if
Yeah.
you comment on other people's comments and stuff, these are all ways to break the ice. And then when you finally get around to messaging someone personally, it's a lot less awkward for them, but also for you. And it makes it easier to actually ask for something. I don't typically suggest coming in straight with an ask, like as part of your initial message, though it does kind of depend on how much time you've invested in the relationship up front. But even just like reaching out and just saying like, "Hey, I just want to make the connection," or "Hey, I really like what you posted." And then, if you do get around to having some sort of advice you want to ask or whatever, just come back to them a little later, like a week or so later or whatever. Networking, quality networking it's a long game. And I don't mean long like it has to take months and months, but you don't want to like rush in. It's like if you had new neighbors and they move in and you just like knock on their door the first day, "Hey neighbor, like hey, we should go grab lunch. Like we should," and you're just like overwhelming them. Like you gotta
Or
just
it's
like
it's more like, you should give me money. Do you have any money you want to give
yeah,
me?
yeah. Or like, "Hey, I need to borrow this thing." You
Yeah.
just want like, "Hey neighbor, like I see you there." And then, just kind of like warm that
Yeah.
relationship over time. I've just like
Yeah.
I've made really good friends on LinkedIn through that approach. Of just like very outward focused, very just like nurturing the relationship, not just trying to get something out of everybody. And if you build those kind of connections, like good things will come. Like if you do have needs that come up. So just another note on networking, just because I see a lot of people doing it the wrong way. Not everybody. I mean, I get some really great people that reach out quite often, but there's a lot of people that don't do it the right way. And I think it backfires on them, even though they may be sincere or they just don't know any better.
Yeah, I agree. We just had Daniel Botero on the podcast. I think this episode will come out right after his. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure you go listen to that. But one of the things he said that really stuck with me is he said, if you ask for a referral, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get a referral. And that just goes back to like the
Ooh,
whole
I like
idea of
that.
actually, I know it's really good. I'm stealing that from him, but like, but it's the whole idea of like, if you just ask for a referral in the first 5 seconds, you're just going to get advice. You're just going to be like, hey, that's probably not the way to ask for it. But if you ask for advice first, like, oh, I'm really like, it's aspirational to see your career journey and like, how'd you do it and stuff like that, you might be able to get a referral that way. So I love
Yeah, I
that.
love
I
that.
love that idea. I love all the other ideas you've mentioned. I think a lot of what you've talked about is all incorporated in the SBN method. You have to, be building your network. You have to be connecting with others, commenting on LinkedIn, posting on LinkedIn. You got to be building projects and portfolios. And I think if you do that, you have a good chance at being like Matt, you guys, and going from a non-technical background, whether that's a teacher or sales or whatever you do, to landing a data analyst role. So Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really great talking with you. This was really cool. Thank you, Avery.
How awesome was that episode? I hope you guys are leaving feeling like, yes, I can network. Yes, I can build projects. Like, I understand the importance that it's 2/3 of the equation of the SBN method of landing a data job. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode and you're new here, please make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button wherever you're listening. And if you don't mind, I would love a rating and review. It literally takes 15 to 30 seconds, especially if you're on Apple. For some reason, we're just not having as many reviews on Apple. I'd love your rating and review if you thought it was a good episode. If not, hey, we got 80 more, and I think there's some good content in there for you as well. They're all free, so go take a listen right now. Have a great day.